long as we want.
Okay, my name is Tammy Stewart, and I'm in the doctoral program in Adult and Higher Ed and Education, and I already talked to a few of you today, but, and this is Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm Lindsay Jackson. I'm in the master's program for Adult and Higher Education, and I also did my undergraduate here, so I've been around Bozeman for a while.
Yeah, and we are going to talk about teaching styles, do a session on teaching styles, and then a session on classroom assessment techniques. And so, I have to admit, I have very little teaching experience, but I have been a GTA, and I did co-teach college teaching, which learned about teaching styles, learning styles, student development, many different things in college teaching, and it's a fantastic class, and I recommend everybody to take it. And Lindsay's taken that class too?
Yeah, and I took that class in preparation for the college teaching certificate, which, are we going to talk about that at all?
Oh yeah, sure.
It's a set of courses open to anyone on the MSU campus, and basically you take a few courses and you get a certificate in college teaching, and it looks amazing on a resume. In fact, we've had several PhD and doctoral students leave and say they were told they got their job because they took this certificate program.
Yeah.
So if you want to know more about that, you can look on the College of Education's website for the college teaching certificate, or go ahead and talk to us, and we'd love to talk to you about it.
And it also helps you develop, what you think of yourself as a teacher and your teaching values, and that looks really good, very impressive. Once you've given some thought to that on your resumes or your CVs.
Teaching philosophy.
Your teaching philosophy. Thank you. And this is the book that, if you don't have, it's a great reference to have. It's McKeechie's Teaching Tips, and it talks about teaching styles, learning styles, student development. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and pass that around. Diverse students, problem students, or not problem, shouldn't say that, challenging students. But it has just about everything in there. It has cognitive learning techniques.
It's super practical too, which is what I liked. I thought it was just going to be a regular textbook, and you open it and they're like, here's this problem, here's how you try and fix it. Here's this problem, here's this opportunity or challenge.
Yeah. We have no problems. They're all opportunities to learn as teachers, along with your students. So with that, I am going to be doing this session on teaching styles, and to open up, we all have our own style. And this style might be the result of, say, your past learning experiences and maybe a teacher that you really, really had a good experience with and enjoyed in the classroom and learned a lot from. And it also can be a result of your personality and assumptions that you bring to your teaching and what you think teaching should be. So, and I believe as a teacher that we do not have just one style, but we have many. And these may change and adapt to as our personality changes, as our experience as teachers change, and it also changes with the students that we are teaching and the discipline that we're teaching it. So the goal of understanding your teaching style is to not rigidly define yourself into one style or pigeonhole yourself into one way of thinking, but to approach the classroom and rather to explore your style and understand who you are as a teacher and the values that you have as a teacher and how these values manifest themselves in the classroom. So not only do we have a preferred way of teaching, but students also come to the classroom with different learning styles, and that's very important to keep in mind. They have different learning styles, different levels of motivation. They also have different assumptions of what they expect to get out of the class and assumptions of you as a teacher as well. So, and they respond differently to different classroom environments and different teaching styles. And there isn't one teaching style that's going to be the best for a student. So, which, all of these have an impact on how you teach in the classroom. So styles should be used as a tool to help you understand the diversity of individuals and how this understanding may influence your teaching. As you think about your teaching style, I think it's important to keep these different learning styles in mind and how they will impact your teaching. Some characteristics that have been shown to be very influential for teaching and learning are different learning styles of students, such as the characteristic ways that students process information. Some are deep, like to learn deep topics. Some are more surface learners. You know, they have different extrinsic, intrinsic motivations for learning, and some are more experiential learners, some are abstract thinkers, some are concrete. So all these different learning styles have an effect on how you can teach the classroom. Student background, cultural diversity also influences how students learn. Their prior knowledge is important, and their innate ability, and again, how they respond to your teaching style also affects their learning. So, and there's also intellectual development of students. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with William Perry and his models of student development, intellectual development, but there's a whole list of theories on student development, which you would also learn in this college teaching class. And so with that, we have an activity, and I want you to think about your past learning experiences and reflect on whether you tend to remember more about the content, or do you tend to think more of the presence of a teacher. So think of a classroom experience that you really enjoyed and maybe you learned a lot from. And do you think more about the content or the presence or the style of the teacher? And so if you can, take out a piece of paper, and I'd like you to jot down on a piece of paper, take 2 or 3 minutes to think about this, and jot down the most important qualities that you think a teacher should possess in the classroom. Okay, does anyone want to share an experience that has made a major impact on you in your learning, your college career? Want to share?
Oh, come on, you guys.
Oh yeah, any
Anything.
teaching experience or teacher.
I had this teacher, an English teacher, and he had a student vocabulary. So he would pick certain words, like just challenging words, and he would use different ways to get us to remember them. The most common is he'd take a sentence, and he would use the word in a sentence, and he'd do it 2 or 3 times a week, and then he'd have us do quizzes and stuff. And I think the biggest quality there that I really enjoyed was that he got everybody engaged. Vocabulary is not, it's something that everybody's very capable of. It's not that hard to stay engaged, and it also kind of brainwashes you almost to remember it, because I can remember certain words just because I used them that way. So it's just getting everybody engaged, I guess, was the overall thing that I would say is important of a teacher, because if you're only going to talk to your best student, or you're only going to talk to your worst students, then your best student never feels challenged and feel like a part of the discussion.
So you had a gift for engaging the whole classroom, making it exciting and fun to learn. Good. Thank you.
Do you guys have tips on doing that with large class sizes? 90 students in class?
How to engage? Well, we are going to go over some classroom assessment techniques after this one, but yeah, definitely there are ways of doing that, and we will discuss that.
Good question. Other people that want to share? Yeah.
I had a professor who had this back cards with everybody's name on them, and you knew when your name was coming in, it's just in order, but still got the because the scared kids were calling you or anything.
Had to know everything, didn't you?
Yeah,
Be prepared.
so,
Good. So, yeah.
I had a professor who was an architecture theory class, and he would put 2 words up on the board right at the beginning of class, and it was very similar words. It was like place versus space, and we had a huge discussion on what one meant versus the other. And he never ever mentioned his opinion, and so everyone developed their own opinion through arguing for what they thought it was versus somebody else.
Oh, that's a great example. I mean, all of these are examples of different teaching styles and how to identify those. Go ahead.
When the teacher has a really strong interest in success of the students, it really plays a big deal, because if they don't seem to care or anything, the student begins to not care about the course. And that's how I feel.
So you feel like he had an interest in in your learning, your cognitive
Yeah.
development.
You're kind of like excited to.
Great, that's really good. And you, Howard?
I like teachers that have a sort of sense of humor, just
Mhm.
kind of like breaks the ice, you know? Talking about something serious.
Definitely. Makes it more enjoyable. Keeps you entertained and wants you to come back to class and you have fun learning. Good.
Interesting. Almost all of these are about the teacher.
Yeah.
About content.
Yeah.
Remember the teacher.
Do you guys remember the content as much? I mean, or do you think you really do, does it come down to the teacher's presence and style in the classroom? What do you think? I mean, I'm sure you remember the content because you're all here, you're all graduate students, but, I mean, when you reflect back on that, I mean, what would you say stands out more to you?
It's definitely teacher's presence.
So if you guys want to just shout out a list of qualities, I'll go ahead and put these, I've already got engaging, humorous,
Enthusiastic.
enthusiastic.
Approachable.
That's a good one.
Knowledgeable.
Great.
Challenging.
I spelled that wrong.
Or the ability to spell. Right out the window on a board.
Oh. Any
Fairness.
more? What's that?
Fairness.
Opinionated.
I'm gonna say not. Yeah, definitely. Or not. Someone said caring, right? That was someone's example.
Assured.
An effective communicator.
That's a good one. And very important.
Thinking about the professor that had that one.
How many professors have we all had that didn't quite meet those standards? Right? Remember, you're having a crash course on how to teach, so maybe you can hit more standards that possibly some people that we've all had classes with that
Yeah, these are
We're quite
good
there.
qualities. We could put, I'm sure we could get a whole list of negative. Let's do that. What do you think that?
what not to do.
Poor speakers.
For?
Contradictive.
Distant.
Unprepared.
I put aimless with that one.
Aimless.
Or English skills.
Okay. What was that one over there?
Dismissive.
Okay.
Egotistical.
And the list goes on. So anyway, you can see by, all of these qualities that you can really set the tone of your classroom. So, I mean, you guys have it in your power to either set a warm, inviting tone or more of a cold and distant tone. So really, that's your choice in how you want to conduct your classroom. So thanks, that was great. Anybody else want to share anything else that we may have missed out on that you feel is very critical and important to have up here?
Yeah. Distancing for perspective. I've had too many professors who have been teaching so long that they don't remember what it is like to be a student.
Oh, yeah.
And when you have younger professors, they kind of understand, and they're usually a lot better at teaching because they were once in each.
That's a great point. And I think, I think maybe older teachers use different teaching styles than younger teachers do, and it's easier to connect with, younger ones because they, just like you said, I mean, they haven't been so far away from learning themselves, but great, that's a great point. Okay, so for our next activity, we're going to pass out this handout. Do you mind doing this? So we have a handout on 5 different learning styles, and this has been developed by Anthony Gracia, who is a professor of psychology, and he's also an editor for a college teaching journal. So he came up with this handout based on surveys and observations that he has done. He's done a lot of research on this topic, and he surveyed professors in his academy as well as other academies, and he came up with the 5 teaching styles. And those are, I'm just going to go over them quickly, because after we kind of just talk about these just real quickly, you guys are going to get into some groups, and we're going to do another activity. So his 5 teaching styles are expert. The teacher is the expert and disseminates the information, concepts, principles as the most important thing that a student can learn from the class. Formal authority. The focus is on clear expectations on how to do things. The teacher sets high standards in the class. You got your personal model, hands-on approach. The teacher will demonstrate how things should be done, and what I say and do models the appropriate ways for students to think about how to do things. Then you have a facilitator, someone who guides the classroom, allows the students to focus on their own needs and goals and to explore the best way to do things for themselves. And this allows for more critical thinking and more cognitive growth of the student. Then you have a delegator approach or style. And this allows students to develop autonomy as independent and self-directed learners. And you are there, if needed, to discuss strategies and also to act kind of as a consultant. So on the back side of that, one side talks about these 5 teaching styles, and you turn it over, he has clusters of styles. So there's 4 clusters of combinations, and these clusters reflect one dominant style as well as subordinate styles of teaching. And the styles reflect or make a statement of who you are as a person or teacher, and they create a mood or set the tone for the classroom. So with that, the cluster 1, we'll talk about cluster 1, which is at one extreme, the expert formal authority blend, where the teacher is in charge. There may be fear in losing control by the teacher. The teacher lectures, the students are relatively passive. The teacher is the focal point in this teaching learning process, and it kind of creates more of a cool, informal classroom setting. And then you have on the other extreme, which is cluster number 4, the expert facilitative delegative blend, and that kind of creates a different picture. And the student is more of the focal point versus the teacher. It sends a message to the students that I am here as a consultant, and I will help you with projects and issues as you are exploring and developing your own way of thinking about things. And teachers and students work together, they share information, and the classroom is less formal. Cluster number 4 also addresses total learning of the student to include more affective learning, which is such as personal and social development of the student, as well as cognitive. So this is the activity. Think of a class session you will be teaching and list 2 to 3 goals you want to achieve. So as a group, you're going to think of a class session. Specify the teaching style that you will use to achieve those goals. List advantages and disadvantages of your teaching style to be used. So you have your handout that tells you the different types of teaching styles. It also goes into advantages and disadvantages, and I want you to think of a session that you guys are going to teach. Okay, with 2 to 3 goals, and then list disadvantages and advantages. Okay, has everyone had a good chance to come up with an idea, maybe a style, your advantages, disadvantages? All right. So, as a group, you guys decided on, who is going to present, maybe? Or do you want to do that now? And maybe each group, or we'll take a couple of groups if you want to present, or just talk about, not really present, you don't have to come up here or anything, but just kind of talk about what you came up with, and a style, and the advantages and disadvantages of that style. Any volunteers? How about you guys?
All right, our class is online basket weaving.
another advantage of that cluster of threes is like a problem-based learning. So as part of the course is being able to work through something. You show the faster. Quite cool.
Right, so you'd be acting more as a facilitator, right, and guide and doing that online, but it gives the student the opportunity to kind of figure these things out for themselves, so to develop their critical thinking. Very good. Anybody else? Thank you for sharing that. Okay.
So we just chose a more general topic of like a general science course. And two important goals for the course were teaching critical thinking, which we thought of as more of a facilitator type role, and then engagement in the topic of the class, which if you more from like an expert, teaching that topic and all that it can be. And we also thought the cluster three would probably encompass all that we wanted with that. And then some advantages for that model is that it does allow for critical thinking and maybe set up for a possible career in science. And a disadvantage that we thought was that sometimes if you have, especially in science versus an expert in a topic or a subject, it's hard for them to facilitate sometimes. They end up lecturing at you instead of kind of discussing.
Right. Good. And are your students freshmen students generally, or did you think about?
Yeah, we have a mix.
Oh, mix. Okay. So you have to meet different, diverse set of learning styles and intellectual development. Great. And I think that cluster three might help with that because you're more of a facilitator and you can guide the different learning styles within the classroom instead of just straight lecturing or setting them free to do whatever they want. Great. Anybody else?
So, we have a introduction to CAD drawing class to give the students like a basic understanding of how to use CAD drawing for whether it's engineering, architecture, and apply the knowledge of the program into like a final design at the end. And we would use cluster 4 teaching. It'd be a smaller class, but it would allow for each student to keep up and have their own like development and connection to the professor and their own project versus lecture class that would just have like kids falling behind, essentially just getting through the course and not actually learning anything. But I guess it's a lot more individually intensive for the student. They can't like just slack off. They have to keep meeting with their professor or whatever. So.
And also be more intensive for you as a professor too. What do you think? Yeah. That's good. I mean, I think that shows how you adapt to more discipline specific content with that style. Great. Anybody else?
Yes, we didn't really name our class. We just decided that as all of us are pretty much in a more of a facilitator role in the kinds of classes that we'll be in, so we thought that was probably the best position to take. So we won't actually be setting the goals for the class, but we can have goals for ourselves in order to help the students. We thought that the best goals to have were to make contact with each student as often as we could, and to be
that's a great example of what you value as a teacher, and maybe as a learner yourself, but you're bringing those values into your teaching and into the classroom. That's really good, thanks. So do we have one more group, or?
Yeah, I guess we chose a structures class. They're all architecture students.
Okay.
Structural. And so the goals of the class would be to learn a bunch of equations and practicing equations to design beams and things like that. So a lot of math equations and repetition of examples. So we chose, or what I'm going to try with the professor is a flip teaching. So we're going to try to take videos of me working examples and doing derivations and posting the videos online and assigning that as the homework. So then when we come to class, there'll be a short quiz or something, and then followed with working through homework problems or going over assignments so that there's more direct feedback. And maybe that way there'll be more interactions with struggling students while they're working on the homeworks. If students are getting the material easily, that crank through it on their own. But if there's some students who are struggling, maybe we'll give them in-class time with me.
Have you been involved in a flipped classroom before? Or?
Sort of. Never had video assignments though, so
Yeah.
something new that we're trying.
Have any of you been in a class in one of the teal classrooms? There's 2 now on campus. They're called technology-enabled active learning classrooms, and they're set up for exactly that. They're all round tables, and you cannot move them to make it into a lecture classroom. The technology aspect are televisions on the walls, and students can hook their computers up through the TV to through the televisions, and the idea is that you flip your curriculum, make it all active-based learning. There's one in Wilson, 119 I think, and the first one was in Gaines Hall 143 if you're ever interested in seeing it. It's pretty inspiring. Amazing success for students. It's for stats and algebra, it was like a 30 to 40% increase in success rates. It was pretty, maybe.
Wow. So do you have
I
to
did actually cry.
schedule that room, or how does that work?
It's scheduled, but you can talk to the registrar about it if you're a professor or you were ever interested in it.
You guys can encourage your professors,
Yeah.
you know?
If you're interested in
You can
flipping.
bring all these ideas into, with you.
Did you just say it was a flipped classroom?
Yeah, that means that instead of lecturing, you are doing the lectures as the homework. So as an example, the videos or maybe a more intensive reading, and then during the day they're doing all active learning, participating in activities, they're working on homeworks, and but what the instructor and the TAs do is just roam around, help groups with assignments. So they did what you guys just did as an example of an active learning activity, and that's what the instructors do is they wander around and talk to students and help them work through things instead of lecturing.
So to create a flipped classroom, someone needs to be recording a lecture at some point, but it's not in front of a crowd like this.
Yeah. Or you can record it and then use it the next semester, but if you want to talk about it, we can afterward.
Well, that was a great example, and thanks for sharing that. So I think what we're kind of running out of time,
Yeah.
and we need to move on to more
I'm sorry for my
classroom
poor
assessment.
scribing abilities here. I realized halfway through that it wasn't really connecting well, but I tried, so I'm sorry if I missed something or spelled something horribly incorrectly.
But you guys came up with some great advantages and disadvantages, and good job. I think it looks great. So,
Oh, thanks.
Do you guys have any questions on teaching styles? Anything you want to ask about?
I think the thing that I learned when I took the college teaching course, and Tammy co-taught the one I was in, which was fabulous, is to use a variety of teaching styles, because you're going to meet some of your students by lecturing, you're going to meet some of their needs by doing an active learning activity, and you're going to meet some of them by having them read things. But if you vary them throughout your entire course, you're going to meet more than one student's needs over a semester. And so that, I know a lot of you guys are going to be teaching larger classes, so that's one way that you can attempt to meet their needs a little bit more effectively. To add my 2 cents.
Definitely.
to
No,
that
that's
thing.
good. I mean,
Sorry.
I could read, I was gonna read this passage,
Yeah.
but I think since you kind of hit on what that was gonna say, I think we should move into some classroom assessment techniques.
All right.
That works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless anyone has a question. No? Has anyone heard of a classroom assessment technique, a CAT? Other than Tammy?
No.
Excellent. Well, Bellis has heard about them. Great. So a classroom assessment technique is a form of assessment, obviously. And I'm going to read this from the book we just told you guys to look at. It says, assessment is not simply an end-of-course exercise to determine student grades. It can be a learning experience for students, and I would say for us as well. Assessment throughout a course communicates your goals to students so they can learn more effectively, identifies misunderstandings that will help you teach better, and help you pace the development of your course, and maybe help you do a little bit better job of assigning grades. We're going to go through a couple assessment techniques that you guys can do quickly in class to help you figure out where your students are. And while I like classroom assessment techniques, they're not a test, they're not a quiz, they're usually not graded. They're informal ways to just check in with your students and see how they're doing. So, and that's if someone says, are you doing a CAT today? They need a classroom assessment technique, something fairly small. I like it because if I'm going to be doing a 50-minute lecture on something and I do 10 minutes of the lecture, I do a quick classroom assessment technique and everybody does really well and they've got it, well, I have a whole semester worth of information that I can now move forward and talk about in that class. Or maybe I've just done 40 minutes of a lecture and I do a quick classroom assessment technique and no one got it. I obviously need to reevaluate what I just told them, right? We need to start doing something else. So it's a really great way to see before the big exam how your students are doing. And they probably won't tell you themselves, so we've made kind of some ideas on ways that you can try and do that. There's a whole chapter in this Mikichi book on doing that. The other, what was the, Angelo and Cross, Classroom Assessment Techniques. I can't remember the full thing here,
Yeah.
sorry.
Angelo and Cross are the
Yeah,
authors.
Angelo and Cross,
And
Classroom Assessment Techniques, it's a book. Angelo and Cross are two authors that you could look into if you're ever curious about these.
We'll put their names and links to them on the page.
Awesome. And you can also get these online. If you just search for Classroom Assessment Technique, you'll find some pretty
yeah, there's a lot of information on it.
So the first one I want to tell you guys about, and it's actually my favorite classroom assessment technique, is one that actually will help your students learn, and I think this one would be really effective for you guys. It's called a memory matrix. And can you pass it out? Yeah. I used this in a history class where we had to understand different sections of history. So I wrote the different sections, sections of history, blanking the word there, but down one side, and then I wrote what I wanted the students to understand about those times up on the top, and then they had to fill in each of those things over the course of an entire semester, and then when we were finished, they had this fabulous cheat sheet for their tests to go back and understand all those different trends over time that we've gone over in class. It was great. And I use it now for all of my classes actually on my phone.
I think we might have ran out.
We need one more right there.
It'll be, I'll have it as a PDF uplink so you can just use them
We need one more.
and print them out on your own.
I think I wrote that one.
Yeah.
Oh, here.
Oh, we can't have Nikki. Never mind. Huh. So we're going to use this today in an activity to learn about other classroom assessment techniques. Actually, they can't have mine. It's a key. So what we want you guys to do, I'm going to pass out some CAT examples. And I want you guys to get in your same groups that you were just in. That's easy. Pass those around. which is one of my other favorite classroom assessment techniques. But basically, you have everyone pull out a piece of paper. You say, you give them a quick question.
Kind of like what we just did.
Yeah, kind of like what we just did. Or you can ask them, what was one thing you learned today? Simple as that. What was one thing that stuck out in your memory from the reading last night? What's your favorite toothpaste? I don't know, whatever you want to write there, but you give them 1 minute, 2 minutes to talk about it, and then you have everybody share. It's a really easy way to kind of get a general understanding of everything. Some teachers have them turn it in at the end of a class session, and then the next week you've read them all, and now you have a quick sort of mini test on how they did. And you can gather them and do participation points. It's a really easy way to see who attended class that day and do participation points, or you don't have to grade it at all, which is what I recommend. But so take your memory matrix, you have the definitions, and then I want you to think about a classroom experience that you may have, or maybe plan on providing to us online for basket reading in the future. And think about some benefits that you could see helping your students if you use these classroom assessment techniques. And Tammy and I will wander around and help.
Yeah, you can work in groups too.
Yeah, working groups.
So that's just more fun.
Okay, so then, alrighty. Any questions that you guys had about classroom assessment techniques? So like I said, seriously, if you just Google classroom assessment techniques, they'll come up with maybe a more definite definition than I gave you, I'm sorry. And there's tons of them. There's an entire book dedicated to just page after page after page of ideas on how you can just quickly find out how your students are doing, and then you will be able to take the steps necessary to move on if they're have sufficient knowledge, or continue teaching them if they haven't understood what you've been trying to tell them. So those are for you, and we'll put them up on the website, I think, so you can use them as resources. And if you have any questions on anything, I'm happy to sit back and talk to you guys, especially the college teaching certificate.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
definitely. Either one of us. And
We're not getting paid to do this, I promise.
Yeah. No, we're out here promoting
Yeah.
college teaching.
Yeah.
But a lot of student development theory classes and there's college students, there's student development. I mean, the college teaching certificate kind of puts you into all those classes, and it really helps you learn about, all aspects of teaching.
And I know you guys had Amanda from D2L. I also just finished co-teaching a post-secondary, distance ed for online education. You actually develop your own mini online class, and it's involved in that certificate as well. So if you're interested in learning more in depth how to teach online, it's a fabulous class. Use that word. So thank you guys for participating with us and being engaged, and I hope that we helped you out a little bit, and good luck in your teaching experience.
Yeah, enjoy MSU.
Yeah.